our first impressions are not the ones that we can necessarily trust with art. And this is a problem, because I think you should generally trust your first impressions. I try and do that. But in art, it's often that we have such an expectation of what is visual, or what speaks for itself, that anything that doesn't do that is seen not to be significant. But if we translated that back to history, Picasso didn't speak for himself in his time. Matisse didn't speak for himself in his time. Mondrian didn't speak for himself in his time. Actually, there were very few people that gathered around those works and said, yes, these are interesting. And the vast majority said, this is nonsense, a couple of black lines on a white canvas, ridiculous. And if we hadn't been able to talk about it, and if people hadn't put their impressions and their ideas about their work into words, because that's one of the fundamental means of communication, then those works would have never been able to speak for themselves, because they would never have a platform to do so. So speaking for yourself, much like democracy, requires work. And to allow an artwork to speak for itself requires a thoughtful expression about that artwork in words before that opportunity arrives. So it's not the first impression, but it's the last impression which counts. And I think then you can say, if the artwork in the last impression, after speaking about it, doesn't then speak for itself, then we have a problem. Because then at that moment, the artwork should in a sense take a life of its own and become something that speaks. But it can't speak in first impression. It has to be spoken through, and once it's been spoken through, at the end of that, then it can speak. But it doesn't start the conversation. If it starts the conversation, it's already something that's known and familiar, and we already have a place for it in society. And therefore, in terms of the traditions of modernism and of postmodernism, it's not such an interesting artwork, because it's a repetition of something that already existed.